Welcome to On the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. This is our 100th episode, and we got a lot to celebrate because you just heard from Mike Elias, the Executive Vice President and General Manager of the Baltimore Orioles. We appreciate him taking the time out for us to record that interview. We covered a lot. Now, purposefully, because that interview was pre-recorded ahead of this 100th episode, we did not get into a lot of player-specific discussions, knowing there was a possibility that some of those questions might be out of date by the time we got to this episode. But still managed to cover a lot of ground in that interview. Appreciate him taking the time out to come on. And Nick, I'll just start with you. Your thoughts on that discussion.
We recorded that interview almost 2 weeks ago, and I still can't believe that we actually interviewed Mike Elias on this podcast. Special shout out, I think, also to Orioles PR staff and their willingness to work with us in getting all these guests. I'm looking forward to having Sig and maybe Eve Rosenbaum down the road. What's up? Let's chat sometime. But Elias was great. I think, he gave us even a little bit of extra time than what we were scheduled for. And patrons heard my true feelings right after the interview in that uncut version that we posted. I can't repeat it because the main feed is family friendly, but I wasn't expecting anything, groundbreaking. Obviously, he's very calculated in what he says. We all know that. But I think my two big takeaways I had were that, when he mentioned that he's looking at 5 guys, barring anything, catastrophic happening, he's looking at 5 of the top 10 prospects in the system debuting this year, which would be Adley Grayson, DL Hall, Bradish, who is now up, and I imagine Stowers, although at this rate, that could be Gunnar Henderson he was talking about. Who knows? But it's these guys are very close. DL Hall, he made those comments about DL Hall earlier in the year, and I think we're seeing those comments play out already just a couple weeks into the season. So, barring any catastrophic events that I'm not going to say out loud, by the end of 2022, we're going to see Grace Rodriguez, DL Hall, Kyle Bradish in starting rotation with a lineup centered around Adley Rutschman, Ryan Mountcastle, Cedric Mullins, Austin Hayes, and this very young, talented core, I think, to build around. And also, the other big takeaway I had, I don't know if you guys kind of got this, but I don't think you can enter this offseason. I don't think the Orioles entered this offseason sitting on their hands again with this group. And I got the vibe when we asked Elias about trading prospects, and he went talking about that. I just felt like his facial expression and his demeanor was kind of he was really happy talking about that. I was thinking to myself, you're getting kind of excited talking about this aspect right now, which just gave me the vibe that's close. He's identified who they're grooming for the big leagues, who they're grooming to be traded. Those discussions are probably already underway. He talked about how difficult it is to make trades, which is pretty cool to hear him say. But I think that time is a lot closer than maybe what we think. And I wish we could have had more time with him and ask him about more detailed questions about particular prospects. With his background in scouting, I think he would have been a pretty awesome conversation. But I think we covered good ground in the 20 or so minutes we had with him.
Yeah, completely agree with pretty much everything you said there. At least he said, he'd love to do it again. So see you next week, Mike. No, well, hopefully we get a chance to talk to him again and dive a little deeper into more specifics. But I completely agree with what you're saying about, and if it's been hard on us fans, I mean, we just had a playoff appearance, 2016. So it hasn't been that long. But for Elias to come in and have to deal with all the negativity of a rebuild brings, especially when it takes this long to get right and has to be uprooted from the ground up. I mean, he has to be excited to be able to flip that switch as well and start to be more competitive and make moves with a more immediate success in mind rather than, oh, here's a guy that could make an impact in 5 or 6 years down the road. So, yeah, I definitely got that vibe as well. I think that he feels we're pretty darn close. As long as these guys can come up, make an impact, show that they're ready to really start, being difference makers as soon as later this year or next year. It's exciting times. I cannot believe that interview happened. It was 2 weeks ago. It feels like yesterday, but it feels like a year ago at the same time. Just feels like kind of a distant memory and a dream. But it was very cool. Can't thank Liam Davis enough, Orioles PR. He's been outstanding in helping us come up with some of these guests. And Matt Sabados recently with Double-A Bowie, pulling double duty, announced and doing a good job there and hooking us up with guys like Drew Rom and Brandon Young. So shout out to him as well. Zach, let's get your thoughts.
I was, thrilled with the way the interview went, and I thought that he gave us a lot of good insight. He did talk about the draft a little bit, which we're going to get into more specifics later on in this show about how the class is starting to take shape a little bit, about 2 months or so out. But I was surprised at his answer when I asked him about whether or not he prefers the draft in late June, where it had been, or I guess really sometime in June, versus the middle of July. And he basically talked himself into liking the draft in June better for various reasons, it seemed like.
Yeah, I think I commented afterwards when we were just talking that you really don't see anybody or hear anybody when they're talking about the draft that's involved in the draft process say like they like the old way better. He seemed pretty genuine. He was like, by the end, like, no, I kind of like the old way better now that I think about it. But yeah, very genuine guy when we interviewed him as well. That was the thing I got from the very start. Very genuine and open with just three dudes with a podcast behind a microphone. So yeah, it was amazing. It was just pretty cool for the show. And imagine what we're gonna do reach when we get to episode 200 by now.
Yeah, who's gonna own the team and who's coming on the podcast to talk about it? No, yeah, I do. I always thought Elias, just hearing him interview, obviously he is all business. He's very to the point, but I don't think he's a BSer necessarily. I feel like if he says something, he means it, even if a lot of it is just GM speak and what you would expect him to say. He'll say things like he said about DL Hall, going to potentially see him sooner than a lot of people think. And I think he means that. I think we see that DL has come out throwing strikes and he's moved fast through the system, and maybe he'll be in Baltimore this time next month. So yeah, I think he's a straight shooter as much as a GM can be. And I think that came across talking to him one on three as well.
Well, we've got a lot of other topics to get into tonight, but we want to make sure we shout out our Patreons. We've got some new members of the community, and I'm going to turn that over to Bob.
Yeah, we put out the challenge, push us over 100 patrons for the 100th episode, and we did it. We have 102 patrons now, so thank you to the new signees, Adam Meese, Tommy Kyle, Andrew Morris, Andrew Bowden, Mike Fallon, Nicholas Andrews, and Chris Hutt. Welcome aboard. We're in triple digits now, and hopefully we can just keep going from here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for your support. And don't forget, On the Verge is part of Baltimore Sports and Life Radio. We've got a lot of great podcasts on this network as well as a lot of good coverage at the site, including Orioles minor league and major league coverage. Ravens, there's been a lot of excellent NFL draft analysis over there lately to go check out, and a lot more. So be sure to see On the Verge as well as Baltimore Sports and Life. And Bob has a little bit of a contest here for us.
Yeah, actually, before I go to that view, let's do here are the sign balls. I don't know if you can see, that's Julio Rodriguez signature. That's Bobby Witt Jr. signature. So
I worked really hard on copying those.
Yeah. You don't know how many official balls we had to go through. It was cost us a fortune. So I have put all of our patrons, all 102 patrons, on a wheel. I'm going to share my screen. Sorry for the podcast listeners that this isn't going to translate. I will try our best to, get through this. The wheel is spinning. Wherever it lands, I'll reach out to you and we'll get you one of these balls of your choice. Oh, Brandon Stoneborg, the survey man, you were so close. Drew Edwards, congratulations. Either reach out to us or I will also reach out to you on Patreon. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Drew. And we'll move on now to what is quickly becoming the big buzz around Birdland, which is that Adley Rutschman is coming soon. In fact, he might be here next week. And the original aim of this segment was to talk about DL Hall and Adley Rutschman being promoted to Norfolk on Friday after going to Bowie for a little bit as part of their rehab assignments. Hall had an excellent second start on his rehab tour. Adley Rutschman was doing Adley Rutschman things in Bowie. They got the call to Norfolk, joined the team in Nashville on Friday. And then here on Monday, it's, based on some speculation, no official announcements, no concrete reports yet saying that it's definitely going to happen, but that Adley Rutschman's debut could be as soon as next week, May 16th, when the Orioles begin a series at home against the New York Yankees. So now Rutschman may only have another week left in the minor leagues. And I'm just going to start with you, Bob. You've shuffled some plans around for next week, right, in anticipation of this?
I think on last week's episode, I said I changed my prediction to May 16th, start of a homestand against the Yankees on a Monday night. And I'm more certain than ever after Ben McDonald said on today's broadcast of the Royals game this afternoon, you might want to buy tickets for that Yankee series next week because something special could happen. Well, I did. I bought tickets for next Monday night, which means we might have to either pre-record our scheduled episode with Justin Ramsey, which still looking forward to that tremendously, AAA Norfolk pitching coach. And we'll probably record our regular episode Tuesday night now. And hopefully we can talk about his Major League debut.
Yeah. It's got to be the 16th. Like, the only thing holding Adley Rutschman back at this point is that Major League schedule. I think it's just really unfortunate timing for him right now because he's clearly fully healthy. And ready to play every single day, but they are not going to waste his Major League debut on the road. They're at St. Louis and then Detroit before they're back home against the Yankees. So like, you've been painfully building up to this moment for so long. The Orioles aren't going to waste this. And I don't blame them one bit. I don't think anyone can blame them one bit for holding him back a few more days until the Orioles are back home at Camden Yards. And I know a lot of Orioles fans are probably going to complain about that over the next week, especially if there's a rough night on the road. But when he's on that Major League roster on May 16th, and again, that's just speculation. We don't know anything for certain, and he's making his MLB debut at Camden Yards in a win over the Yankees. Like, I don't think anybody's going to be complaining anymore. You know, you look at his numbers, he's played in 10 rehab games. He's hitting 400, 5 doubles, 6 walks, just 2 strikeouts and 41 plate appearances. Like, the guy's ready as he's ever going to be. And he's right here. I would bet a lot of money. I got permission to come up. I was telling you guys before the show, I got permission to come up for that game Monday night. And I'm unfortunately not going to, but I would make the 3-hour trek and spend all the money because that's how confident I am that Adley Rutschman will debut on May 16th.
It does feel like he is ready. And I didn't know what the recovery was going to look like, if it really was much of a recovery or it was just get a tune-up in and get back out on the field. But he does look ready. And I think that, for the next week or so, you try to manage his workload behind the plate because he should be back there catching, but not every single night, obviously. And, bring him up here next Monday if that is the plan and let him get started. I do think that you're going to have some fans that are upset that he's not up sooner. But I think the number of fans who would be upset if he debuted in St. Louis or Detroit would be a lot higher, because let's not forget that it's almost a full week between the start of the next road trip and the start of the next homestand. If you're a fan that has been kind of at the fringe of this rebuild, that just decided I'm going to tune out until they're good again or until there's signs of them being good again, you're already looking at the calendar thinking, okay, April 6th or May 16th, excuse me, if Adley Rutschman is in the major leagues on that day, that's the day I'm tuning back in. That's the day I'm going back to Camden Yards on a Monday night. And I think that there's probably a lot more of them than there are people like us who are like, all right, just bring him up and, let him play and let's see what kind of impact he can have. And I'll just also, state this about this team. This team is a lot of fun to watch, the 2022 Orioles. I think they're clearly better than last year's Orioles, and I think they have potential to be a lot better from win-loss record, but they're not going to playoffs. So this extra week is not going to make a big impact on the win-loss record in the standings. I think that, for his sake, I want him to get as much major league time as he can get, but for the teams, for the overall organization's sake, and what you're going to do for the fans, there's probably a strong argument for just waiting until next week to bring him up.
100%. I mean, it's going to feel like another opening day. It's going to feel like the coronation of this rebuild, even though it's not. I mean, obviously, it's just another step in the right direction. Get these guys up. We're going to have another version of this soon with Grayson making his debut, DL making his debut, Kyle Stowers to a lesser extent. I mean, it's going to feel like a celebration. Win or lose that game, it's just going to be amazing to have him actually in the lineup after it felt like the rebuild started when we took him at 1-1 in 2019. It's just going to feel like the culmination of a lot of hard work and a lot of pain and suffering from the Orioles fans' perspectives. But just to put things in perspective as far as Adley, and basically this is his spring training to me. I mean, he's got almost 42 plate appearances on this rehab stint so far, across 3 levels. Basically, his spring training since he was shut down, he had a 231 WRC plus in Aberdeen, 209 with Bowie, and 131 in AAA. His strikeout percentage, 4.7% strikeout rate, which is pretty insane, and a 14.3 walk rate, which is right in line with what you would expect from him. He hits the ball so hard every time. I haven't seen one time where he's made contact and it's like, oh, didn't get all that one. If he makes contact with the ball, it's hit hard. So I'm excited to see his average exit velocity. I'm excited just to look at his StatCast page every day throughout the rest of the season and just see how he goes. Even if he doesn't come out of the gate, maybe he comes out like Julio and Bobby Witt and Jared Kelenic have, and he struggles a bit, but it's still going to be exciting to see him develop at the major league level, and we're very close.
Yeah, and for me, I know Orioles fans want to see Adley Rutschman in the majors last year. I think the three of us talked when we were at a game at Bowie last year, and we thought that was going to be it for him in Bowie because I think his family was there. And so I assumed that was going to be it for him, but he ended up staying for a couple more weeks, I think. He could have been in the major leagues last year. There's no doubt about that. Nobody's disagreeing with that whatsoever. But he was drafted in 2019, so he only got half a season of pro ball. And then 2020 happened.
And he had mono.
Yeah, he had mono, so that delayed the season. And then there was the big tour, too. He went on this big, huge awards tour because he won every college award possible. So all that got delayed. So he got a couple of weeks in pro ball where they win him on, didn't he play at 3 levels or something that in 2019? So then 2020 gets shut down. And now 2021, he has this injury. And there's some delusional, this is a fake injury BS or whatever. No. So now that got delayed as well. So I think Bob's comment there about this being his spring training is completely accurate. And he's going to come up and he's going to be fine. And I think the Orioles don't want to bring these guys up, and they want that transition to be as easy as possible. And you see guys now like Bobby Witt Jr. is playing pretty well. I know I think he's striking out a lot. And so, but he's a rookie. That's going to happen. I think Julio Rodriguez's strikeouts were more umpire driven than his, abilities at the plate. But the Orioles don't want to mess this up when they bring these prospects up, and guys are going to struggle. And I was thinking the other day, watching one of the Padres games, they got a guy like CJ Abrams, who's a phenomenal prospect and a guy who, by all accounts, should be a major league regular for the next 15 years. Dynamic player, but they have him platooning and playing multiple positions. This utility role, and he's struggling right now in the major leagues. When would you really want a guy up doing that in that role like the Padres have in CJ Abrams, or would you want him in AAA seasoning a bit and coming up when the time is right? And I fall on plan B on that side. And now is Adley Rutschman's time. So it's here, and no one's going to complain anymore when he's up in the major leagues.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% because I think you want to get it right when you bring these players up. And that's why I always talk about, even with promotions within the minor leagues, of, make the promotion last. So another guy that a lot of fans are clamoring to get promoted right now, Gunnar Henderson, who is having an excellent start at Bowie. Make that promotion in Norfolk last. Give him a defined role where he's in the lineup every single night and don't have to send him back down. I view it the same way of bringing prospects up to the major leagues. Give them a defined role, give them the time to develop and take their lumps and make it last. And if the Orioles can do that with Adley Rutschman, which I think they can, that will be a success. And I had an interesting question there from Vivek about the American League Rookie of the Year race, which I think, maybe Rutschman has a shot at getting back into, which was, Bob, do you mind pulling it up?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Can Adley make up ground in the American League Rookie of the Year race? Steven Kwan and Jeremy Pena probably lead right now. Julio Rodriguez and Bobby Witt, who were 2 top contenders coming into the year, have struggled a little bit, but those were 2 good options in Kwan and Pena. We all 3 said at the start of the season when we did our predictions show that we didn't think Rutschman would win American League Rookie of the Year because of the lost time. Are either of you inclined to change your minds right now?
I think he could. But you also have Joe Ryan for the Twins pitching his heart out. I mean, I feel like Steven Kwan has got to be the heavy front runner. That guy is fun to watch. He does not swing and miss very much at all. And he's already got a month and a half of play by the time Adley comes up potentially. So I do think it's possible if Adley comes up and performs like we know he can, then yeah, he can certainly still win this. But he's starting from a bit of a hole, and he'll have to be like Wander Franco from last year to really have a chance. But it'd be great. I'm fine if he wins, even if we lose that year. I do not care. It means he came out and he's performing well. I'll take that every day of the week. We want to sign him to an extension anyway.
Yeah, the extension is going to come anyway, so that's kind of regardless. And I almost wonder, like, Kwon seems like, was he ever like a top 100 big time prospect guy, or is
only from Eric Longenhagen's point of view? He had him in top 100. I think he was a bit of an outlier.
I mean, that's normally the case with a lot of guys, which is why I love those lists. I feel like Kwon, could be like a pop-up risk guy. Like, is that going to continue this full year? I don't know, but Cleveland does a fantastic job with their prospects and their system, so it could. Jeremy Pena, I feel like I don't know too much about Jeremy Pena, except I think I had a couple of his rookie cards and I sold them for like almost nothing. And then he was like destroying the ball recently. I was like, maybe I should have held on to those. But I feel like a lot of people don't like Jeremy Pena and his prospect, him as like a future major leaguer. So, those Adley Rutschman, I feel like, has the name for himself, and the fact that he's a catcher. If he's a catcher and comes out and hits extremely well, like he has his entire career up to this point, then yeah, I think he can make a big push for Rookie of the Year race.
So how do you think Oregon State fans feel right now? Stephen Kwon against Adley Rutschman possibly for Rookie of the Year down the stretch over the next few months?
Can we get a Caden Grenier sighting?
I was going to say, where are the Caden Grenier believers at? I know they're out there.
So I do want to talk about DL Hall because he's been pitching really well in his recovery from his injury last summer in the minor leagues. He's now made a start at high A, a start at double A, and so far in that stretch, he has been pretty much lights out and has overmatched hitters that he should be overmatching in a normal sense. But when you factor in how much time he has missed, it's impressive. 7 2/3 innings combined over 2 starts. 12 strikeouts against 1 walk with a 2.35 ERA. He's now going to Norfolk. This is going to be his first run at AAA. You have to think that he's going to be left there for a little while to stretch out. And I think you want him to get not as far as the Orioles were pushing with Grayson Rodriguez necessarily, where Rodriguez is now going into the 6th inning on starts. He's got his pitch count up over 80 pitches. I don't know if Hall necessarily gets there or gets there quickly, but I do think you see him stretch out a little bit. Now, that aside, I think you guys would agree his stuff has looked really good to this point.
It looks better than ever to me. I mean, if you just look at that box score from last Thursday, you'd be like, okay, he gave up 2 runs, struck out 6 guys, walked a batter. Well, his 1 walk was aided by a automatic ball call because he took too long in between pitches. Not going to have to deal with that soon at the major league level. And 47 of his 59 pitches were for strikes. That's 80% for a guy who has command issues. Yeah, pretty darn good. So, and his fastball, it looked like easy 98, 99, touching 100. Didn't even look like high effort. His changeup was just getting swings and misses left and right. I thought he looked absolutely incredible. I think they might want to get him up to 70, 75 pitches before he gets to the major league level. So I'd give him like maybe 6 starts in AAA as long as everything goes well. And I think they're going to get him up here, and he'll be in like the Tyler Wells type schedule, which we saw him pitch 6 innings today, which was pretty cool to see. So I don't think they're going to waste many bullets. It's a little bit different than Grayson because Grayson's, I think, expected to be like a workhorse ace, top of the rotation type of guy. And, he's almost there. I think they're just going to be more careful with him, with DL, especially with his potentially injury history type of stuff. Get him up here, get him in the majors, and let him loose.
Yeah, like DL Hall is not a relief prospect. Anybody who was along that path, I think, no, you watch this guy pitch this year, and he's out to prove a lot of people wrong. And I think he's showing you in these 2 outings exactly why you have national writers like Carlos Collazo and friend of the pod, Ben Badler, on their podcast, were saying before the season started how, in their opinion, DL Hall had a real argument to be the top pitching prospect in all of baseball once Grayson Rodriguez graduates. And you look at that start like he had in Bowie, and I felt like last year in Bowie, it was a lot of, he was using that overpowering fastball to blow past guys. And when he would try to go off speed or use the secondaries, that's when the pitch counts would rise and he would get into some trouble. And then the other day, it just seemed, it was like Matt Sabatos on that broadcast, like change up, swing and miss, strike 3, change up, DL Hall on the change up. It was all change up. And he's getting so much swing and miss. and he's in a spot with that pitch. I think he flipped in like one curveball as like a, hey, I have this pitch as well. Like the secondaries are working as well. He's not just relying on that 99, 100-mile-an-hour heat to blow guys away. That's impressive. And I think we might have been kind of wrong about this whole the Orioles handling him with kid gloves thing, like possibly leading up to that major league cup of coffee at the major leagues out of the bullpen. I think that if he comes out and continues to pitch this well in Norfolk, I think he's in the majors very, very soon. Like Bob said, I don't think they're going to waste any of those bullets in his arm. And I think DL Hall is out, like I said, to prove a lot of people wrong, because every conversation around DL Hall has been about that control. He has to throw strikes. He has to throw strikes. And I remember being on one of those preseason Zoom calls with him last year when he was in Bowie, and he was like, I'm sick and tired of people talking about that. And I think he went to the alt site. He said that was the focus at the alt site, was to clean that up. And we didn't get to see it last year because of the injury, and we haven't really get to see it over an extended period this year. But so far, he's shown a lot of people that he has cleaned that up. He's a strike thrower. He's a flamethrower. And this is going to hurt to say. Like, I'm already going to get sick here. But I agree with Keith Law. Keith Law was the early man on this and saying that I know he was the early man on this and saying that he thought, as far as the ceiling goes, DL Hall has the higher ceiling. And I compared to Grayson Rodriguez, and I firmly agree with that take.
Yeah, I do as well. And it's not, I still think Grayson is the best pitching prospect in baseball, but for different reasons. I think from pure stuff standpoint, Hall's tops maybe in all of baseball if he can come up and do this at the major league level. I mean, it's insane, just the raw ability that he has with his left arm. We had the guy from the Orioles a long time ago, 24-karat arm, right? So I think DL Hall's the real 24-karat arm, and he's got a chance to show it off soon.
So we got a question here from Addit, which is, when it comes to calling people up, what percentage does business/promotion take up, and how much of it is the baseball reason? I think most of the time the baseball reason is going to take precedence. And I know we kind of took the business angle with Adley Rutzman, but that's a little bit of a different case where the Orioles are out of town for a week. And if you can, you might as well. But curious to get your thoughts on this. My personal feeling is that baseball reasons probably drive the decision most of the time, especially if you have the expectation of winning. I would hope that the days of David Clyde, I think it was, getting called up way too soon by the Rangers are well in the past for baseball, but curious to get your thoughts on this.
I think it's baseball for when they're ready to come up, and it's business/promotion as far as the timing. I mean, and it makes sense kind of from just a baseball perspective as well. If a guy's coming up, it's a big pressure thing to make your major league debut as it is. You'd rather it be in front of friendly fans that are on your side and going to boost you up rather than just, I don't know, it could be a little bit tricky to have to travel all the way on the road, think about it the whole time you're traveling. I mean, it's still going to be a lot of pressure no matter what, but it makes sense to make your major league debut at home if at all possible.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. You want that's a special moment, I feel like, for fans as well. Like, we followed these guys in the minor leagues, even people who aren't religiously following the minor leagues like we do, or the Patreon group, right? Like, you still know who Adley Rutschman is, and you still following his journey and checking on that box scores most nights probably. And so, like, why would you want to, all this anticipation, why would you want to see him make his debut against the St. Louis Cardinals on May 10th or whatever tomorrow's date is? Yeah, May 10th. Like, I want to see him at home at Camden Yards making that first debut, his first hit to be at Camden Yards, his first home run, if possible, to be at Camden Yards, right? Like, that's what I want. The only thing I did think about when there was this whole, like, is Kyle Bradish coming up? I think Kyle Bradish, this is it for him. And they were going to play the Angels on the road. I did think that was a possibility because, he's not that premier prospect like Adley or Grayson is, but he's still obviously a fantastic prospect and pitching really well in the major leagues right now. But he was a New Mexico State guy or New Mexico guy, was drafted by the Angels. So I'd imagine like maybe it's easier for family and friends to get out to see him. But yeah, at the end of the day, like travel purposes, family, comfort, all of that, I think that does play a small role in it, of course it will. And at the end of the day, like, unfortunately, the guys running this team, this is a business. And so, yeah, that's going to take into account too.
We're going to go on a completely different path here and talk about what happened in Bowie yesterday, which was the 11th no-hitter in Bay Sox franchise history. Game 1 of the doubleheader, Garrett Stallings and Morgan McSweeney combined to no-hit the Harrisburg Senators as part of a 4-0 win for the Bowie Bay Sox. And I'll just read off some numbers here. Stallings really picked up the load in Game 1 of a 7-inning doubleheader, going 6 innings, no hits, obviously, 2 walks compared to 5 strikeouts. He has been off to a phenomenal start this year. Then Morgan McSweeney came in with the shutout 7th inning to seal the deal. So I think personally, no-hitters are fun no matter what the context is. But it was especially good to see this one because you had 2 pretty intriguing prospects out there with their best stuff on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, Drew Rom just said last week on this show that Garrett Stallings is going to be a guy that more people need to be talking about. And what does he do? He's part of a combined no-hitter, 6 no-hit innings himself. The man's got a 0.75 whip on the year. The ground ball rate I noticed earlier in the year was really low, but that's climbing up again. I've always enjoyed watching Stallings work. I think he works fast. I think he does a good job of missing those barrels. A lot of those home runs are kind of cheapies, I thought, last year. And that's still kind of an issue so far. It's still very early. I think he's given up 3, maybe 4. I think it was 3 last time I checked. But I think he's doing a better job overall this year. I think he's got a little bit more pep in his step this year, a little bit more focused. And, if he can emerge as a legitimate starting pitching prospect, it only adds to the depth of this system. And, it was cool to see Morgan McSweeney as well. This is a guy that you talk about Fangraphs and outliers. He was on Fangraphs top 40 list. Both of the fantastic job for those guys. The 11th no-hitter in Bowie Bay Sox history. So pretty cool.
Yeah, I feel like I'm using up a lot of my material that's going to be in my Down on the Farm column that's coming out later tonight. But shout out to Garrett Stallings, who this is what happens when his home run to fly ball percentage is at a normal rate. It's at 12% right now, and he's got a 2.63 ERA. So I think, he's probably not going to be quite as good as his stats right now indicate long-term, but he pounds the strike zone. He's second on the team in walk percentage, which is actually higher than it was at any point last year. So it could probably still come down. And he's 17th in the Eastern League in walk rate. Only Drew Rom is better. And he's striking out more batters than he ever has. He's striking out 25%. I think 20%, right around 20% was his high last year, either with high A or double A. So it's improvement. It's good. It's you love to see it. The more pitchers we have coming through, the better, and we got plenty of them. I think if he pitches it like this for another month or two, he could be in AAA once Grayson and D.L. Hall move up to the major league level.
Yeah, I completely agree. He has looked really good this year, and I think that the efficiency, not giving up a lot of hard contact, are so crucial to him being successful, and he's managed to zero in on those areas this year. And I do think that when you look at Morgan McSweeney's production this year, there is more than what meets the stat line. Because ERA after Sunday's outing sits at 5.59, but he was hit around in back-to-back outings early in the season and then has settled down since then. And right now you're looking at a guy that has 13 strikeouts to 3 walks and 9 2/3 innings of relief. And Fangraphs was high on his stuff. I think his stuff has mostly been there for him this year. So I'm curious to see if, he puts together a good month of May, what his numbers are going to look like.
I love the Wake Forest guys. I've said it before. I'm going to keep saying it. You come out of Wake Forest, I'm betting on you to make it. Really cool to see that. And like you mentioned, especially it being a guy like Stallings as a starting pitcher. If it was when Michael Baumann threw that no-hitter the other year for Bowie, it was like, this is a legit pitching prospect that a lot of people are excited about. That's good to see. But for it to be a guy like Stallings, who a lot of people are kind of overlooking or, not really paying much attention to, you kind of put your name out there and put yourself on the map. And so it's good to see. I will be anxious to see how he can handle AAA pitching. And I think there's still a lot more questions he needs to answer, but so far so good.
Yeah, I think with Kyle Bronovich, we talked about him, or at least I think I did at some point somewhere along the lines, that he could be like that 5th starter guy. He doesn't have exactly the stuff of a Bradish or Rodriguez or Hall, but he's a kind of pitcher that could hold down a 5th rotation spot. I think maybe Garrett Stallings could angle to take his place while Bronovich recovers from his elbow injury. I think he's another guy that can kind of, give you 5-6 quality innings at the back end of a rotation if everything goes right.
Talk about someone at Bowie who has just been playing at such a high level all season, and that's Gunnar Henderson. And Nick tweeted these stats out on our account at BSL on the Verge. this morning, and there's just some in here that I want to read off because they're so impressive. He has reached base in all 25 games played this season with the Bay Sox. 965 OPS, 4 home runs, 4 doubles. He has walked more than he has struck out, 23 walks compared to 20 strikeouts. 176 WRC plus, and 10 for 10 in stolen base attempts. I don't know where the speed came from or the stolen base speed came from all of a sudden, but he's been really successful on the bases this year. I think the three of us had expectations that Gunnar Henderson was going to break out even more than he already has this year, that he would go to Double-A and he would handle it well. But I don't know that any of us quite thought that after 81 at-bats at Bowie to start the season, he would have an OPS well over 900, 965 right now, and that he would be walking more than he has struck out. This is, to me, has just been really impressive in so many different ways because he's doing all the things you expect Gunnar Henderson to do, which is hit the ball hard, but he's a more complete hitter than he's ever been.
It's unbelievable. He's going to be, if he keeps this up, he'll be in AAA before he turns 21. He is angling to be a top 25, top 15 prospect in baseball at this point. I mean, he's so young. The improvement in walk and strikeout rate is insanely drastic. And it's just like something clicked like that. And he still has that power to all fields that we've seen. I think Nick noted this as well in a recent daily update, that even when he like flies out, quote unquote, it's on a line at like 385 feet, either to dead center or in one of the gaps, and it just gets tracked down. Like he's killing the ball. He only has 4 doubles, 4 home runs, but it's not indicative of how hard he's hitting the ball consistently. He's walking 21.1% of the time, which is way higher than he did last year, which we saw him improve during the year last year as well as he moved up. And he's like he's top 5 or top 10 in most offensive categories. He's number 2 in on-base percentage in Double-A Eastern League at 459. He's got an 18.3% strikeout rate, which even when he was demolishing low A Delmarva at the beginning of last year, he struck out almost 30% of the time. So it's such a drastic improvement, and it's in every facet. He's 10 out of 10 in stolen bases, like you mentioned. His defense looks noticeably better. He is fielding the ball cleaner. He is getting to more balls, and he's very accurate with his throws all of a sudden. So to me, he's been the revelation of this season in the minor leagues for me, and he's the number 1 prospect in the Orioles system as soon as DL Hall, Grayson Rodriguez, and Adley expire their prospect status.
Yeah, I don't think any of that was an over-exaggeration. Like, this is a 20-year-old kid who is walking more than striking out. And you look at those insane strikeout numbers he had, and that was the whole discussion last year about how much he's striking out at all levels. He's not doing that this year. And what I know, we talked a lot recently, there's been a lot of discussion about the Colton Cowser strikeout rates, right? And when do the strikeout rates and walk rates tend to stabilize? Well, we're past that point, and look what Gunnar Henderson is doing. These are phenomenal numbers for a 20-year-old who's 3-4 years younger than the competition. I didn't look. I'm not going to be able to pull it up. Baseball Reference does not work very well for me on this computer. But has he faced a pitcher younger than him yet in Double-A? Because as of like a week ago, he hadn't. Every single at-bat he had taken in Double-A this year was against guys older than he is. So, yeah, it's the speed. Pull up the comment here, too, from voice of the Bay Sox, Adam Pohl. I liked his comment too. He said, something to watch as a big leaguer down the road. He gets really good jumps and stealing bases, has a good eye at the plate. I wouldn't have thought to say this a month ago, but he has been more of a perfect table setter in Bowie, could lead off. Yeah, he could be a fantastic leadoff hitter at the next level. And we know that the Orioles, and I believe Elias mentioned this when we talked to him, that yeah, maybe initially they're more conservative with some minor league placements with some guys, but they're going to challenge these guys when they're ready. And I think Gunnar Henderson is ready. It's been a month. I think you're going to see a lot of movement when Adley comes up at the top of this roster. There's a lot of dead weight on that major league roster. As fun as it is, and as much as this team has improved, there's still a lot of dead weight on that roster. And so I think you're going to see guys move up to the major leagues from AAA. You're going to see some of these AAA guys, I think, possibly even get the boot. And it's time to make way for some of these AA guys who are really impressing so far. And Gunnar Henderson leads that back. Yeah, I think this is the guy. It seems like every player we've talked to as well, every hitter we've talked to, has gone out of their way to mention Gunnar Henderson as a dude, like a real dude. And so he's got the respect of his teammates, and he's going to get the respect of a lot more people here as the season goes on.
Completely agree. And Nick, 109 plate appearances for Gunnar Henderson this year. All of them have been against older pitchers.
There you go. The guy's doing it. And he's completely blown that narrative up of he starts slow and it takes time to adjust, and then he hits the ball well. He came out from day one and hasn't turned back since.
You forgot 3 true outcomes hitter, that narrative.
Yeah, that's done too. He literally did a 5-tool play right here. Is there 6 tools? He's a 6-tool play.
I think Orioles fans are going to love him, watching him play too, because he is so competitive. He gets so into the game. He gets so fired up, hustle doubles, like gets pissed off if anything doesn't go his way in a positive way. So yeah, love watching him play. I can't wait to see these young guys come up.
Absolutely. And I think that Henderson's time in AAA is probably sooner rather than later. We'll turn our attention now to the 2022 MLB Draft, which will take place in the middle of July. And at this point, mock drafts, you have to treat them as what they are, which is preliminary, because a lot of things can change. But we have had a couple of mock drafts come out in recent weeks, and we thought that with the Mike Elias interview being included on this show, it would be time to turn our attention to some that came out towards the end of April, because it presents some different options for the Orioles at number 1. And for example, MLB Pipeline, Jonathan Mayo put together his mock draft, and he has the Orioles going with Brooks Lee, the shortstop out of Cal Poly, with the number 1 pick. The reasoning being in part that college hitter, we know the Orioles like college hitters. This would be an opportunity to go under slot. Lee has shown that he, maybe can stick at shortstop, having a good year at Cal Poly. But then Prospects Live has the Orioles going with Drew Jones, who in a competitive class, and believe me, it is still a competitive class. There's a lot of things that aren't settled, but in a competitive class, a lot of pundits seem to be moving in the direction of Drew Jones as the number 1 pick over some guys that we talked about a lot back in February when we were really ramping up our draft coverage a little bit, including Tamar Johnson. It feels like Jones is separating himself from the pack a little bit, and really who the Orioles take at this point in your mind probably has to depend on what you believe their strategy is going to be. If it's going to be a repeat of the last 2 years where they go with the college bat that they feel like is advanced, could get to the major leagues quickly, has a lot to offer, and they can sign for a deal that's under slot, it could be somebody like Brooks Lee. If they go for, like they did in 2019, consensus top player available, especially if that player is regarded as the hands-down favorite to be the number 1 pick, they're going to go with Drew Jones. It really does feel that way right now. Now, that's not to say that it can't be Tamar Johnson, or it couldn't be Jackson Holliday, or it couldn't be some of the other names that we might talk about tonight, but it does feel like maybe you can things are starting to come into picture a little bit. And I'll start with Nick here. Just kind of curious to get your thoughts. We know that mock drafts are taking a look far into the distance. Mike Elias talked a lot about high school hitters when he was on our show, but didn't really name names. So where do you think the Orioles stand right now?
So, yeah, MLB Pipeline did have Brooks Lee, and I think Baseball America in their latest mock draft also had Brooks Lee going to the Orioles. I haven't watched any of these high school kids. I've got nothing but what I've read on Baseball America, Prospects Live, and other places. I typically have good reads on a lot of the top college guys, but welcoming a second child right after baseball season started, I think most of my focus was making sure I saw Chase DeLauder as much as possible at JMU before he graduates. And luckily, I got to see him before he broke his foot. So if he falls later, Mike Elias, we know you're listening to the podcast. Matt Blood, Brad Seelig, Chase DeLauder falls. There's your guy. But we also know, and Jonathan Mayo mentioned in the MLB Pipeline podcast, that the Orioles are heavily scouting all 4 of the top high school picks. Who was it for? Kylie McDaniel at ESPN he was at the Drew Jones playoff game, and he said, look, there were top level executives or scouts from the teams with the top 3 picks watching Drew Jones playoff games when he hit that just unbelievable home run shot that Kylie posted. So the Orioles are in on these high school kids. And I do agree with the fact that this is the time to go after one of those, roll the dice on one of these high ceiling high school kids, especially when this college class or this draft class seems to be loaded with college bats. And the Orioles have 5 picks in the top, 70 something, 80 something picks. Like, my preference honestly would be Drew Jones right now, but I'm only saying that because he's a center fielder who hits uber impressive home runs, and his dad was one of my favorite baseball players of all time. I'm excited to get someone who has watched these guys live to talk about them and learn more about them. But like, if it's Tamar Johnson, cool. If it's Elijah Green, I'm fine with that. If it's Brooks Lee, honestly, I'm fine with that. I think the Orioles are going to take who their model believes and who their scouts believe is the best player available at this juncture. But yeah, you mentioned Elias, what he mentioned in that interview, and my takeaway is that I believe that he thinks the high school pick is going to be the right pick here. And then you can load up with college bats early in the draft. And without pitching, it seems like every top college pitcher is either hurt or suspended. So maybe teams at the back end of the first round might reach for some pitching. I don't know. And maybe that could leave some first round quality bats available to the Orioles, and you can save money there and go all in with that 1-1 pick.
Yeah, I agree. And Vivek mentioned he got the hint that Elias was leaning high school over college. I kind of got the same vibe, just the fact that he said, some years it doesn't really pay to have the first overall pick, but this year it does. To me, that's Graham's, Drew Jones, Elijah Green, these high school guys, Tamar Johnson. So I think I've been a big Tamar Johnson this whole time, but I do have to admit I'm coming around on Drew Jones the more I see and the more he just separates himself from the field. So I wouldn't be shocked if it was Brooks Lee either. How could you be? But I think it's going to be Drew Jones, and I think they'll find a way to save some money somewhere else to make the most of these picks. And it's exciting. I think, look, the team is already playing better now, and Adley, Grayson, Deal, they're not even up at the big league level yet. We haven't even churned out all the bottom feeders on the major league squad that will be gone by June. So I think the Orioles' major league record is going to be improved this year, and unless we get really lucky with the lottery, we're probably not going to have a top 5 pick. So make the most of this one, as I've been saying, and I think it's going to be Drew Jones. And like Nick said, we can still get some really quality college hitters and maybe a couple pitchers with those first 5 or 6 or so picks. So I think it's going to be good.
I said at the onset of this year that I thought the class had probably 6 players or so in it that I would be happy with at the number 1 pick. I think the number still stands around 5 or 6 for me, even if that field of players has been mixed up a little bit. Chase Delauder was a guy that I had in mind as a possible 1-1. But, as Nick mentioned, he's hurt, so that's not going to happen. Brooks Lee was someone that I'll admit I was coming into this year not quite as enthusiastic about. Just for some reasons, one of them being something that Stephen Loftus pointed out in what I think was his last article for Baltimore Sports and Life before he went to the Braves, and I think he talked about a little bit in his last appearance on the show, was the walk rate. Was not high for Brooks Lee last year. This year it is up significantly. He's walked almost 18% of the time this year for Cal Poly, but I wanted to pull this stat up. He's been walked 40 times this year, 18 of them intentional. So, take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. Now, high school hitters probably get walked a lot more than that, but something to consider with Brooks Lee. And I still think that you can make a valid argument for Brooks Lee as the top pick, but I think for me right now, I lean towards the high school bats. Tamar Johnson still is the safest pick in my mind because of the bat. But Drew Jones is, I think, the closest thing you have to a 5-tool player in this draft. And it's not often that you get an 18-year-old who already has this raw skill set that is so good. And the one thing that everybody can agree on in their scouting reports is that he will stick in center field. You don't see that with 18-year-olds very much.
Oops. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, and I think too, like, Tamar could be the pick as well. Like, if the Orioles are watching him and they think maybe he could stick at shortstop for us, let's get him in our system, and we think that could work, then I could see them going Tamar as well if that hit tool is as advertised. What was it? Tony Gwynn, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. or Vladimir Guerrero Sr. and like Babe Ruth hit tool combined, like some absurd comp they had. But yeah, and I see the comment here from Added about Jackson Holiday. You guys mentioned him as well. Jackson Holiday is the new pop-up name that I think MLB Pipeline said he went up like 40 or 50 spots on their list after his start. And yeah, I think his dad is Matt Holiday, who's like an assistant at Oklahoma State. And I think his uncle is the head coach, or there's another family member that's the head coach. But clearly this is becoming the hot name as the high school season kind of wraps up over the next couple of weeks. So yeah, I'm excited to get someone on the show who has watched these guys live multiple times and get their thoughts on these high school kids. But this is the year to have the number one pick, because I don't know if you pick any of these four guys, like, and even if it is Brooks Lee, I do get why fans maybe wouldn't be as excited if it is Brooks Lee, but I really don't see where you can go wrong with whoever you end up taking at 1-1 this year. There's just so many options.
Yeah, absolutely. And, a guy we haven't really talked about, I would be okay with Elijah Green. If the rationale from the Orioles was, you've seen what we've done with Gunnar Henderson, Kobe Mayo, Kyle Stowers, the guys with good hit tools, a lot of power, but questionable swing and miss tendencies, concerned they're going to strike out a lot. Look at how we've developed them. We can do the same thing with Elijah Green. I'd be fine. I would respect that choice. I would respect that. I think that there are big question marks with Green, but if they felt like the player development system was as such that they could get the best out of him while minimizing some of the tendencies that have caused him to slip a little bit in the rankings coming up to this year, I would be okay with that.
Yeah, I kind of getting like Kumar Rocker, just me personally, I'm getting Kumar Rocker vibes from Elijah Green. It was like rocker leading up for like 2 years leading up to the draft. And then that last year was kind of like, is he really that good? Like, are we overhyping him? It was like that prospect fatigue that we talked about with Stephen Loftus, even admitted like, yeah, there probably is some of that going on. I'm kind of at that point with Elijah Green. I feel like it's been Elijah Green for the last 2 years. And I'm like, there's all these cooler, like sexier names popping up. It's like, is he really that good still? But yeah, I think that's a great point that I'm not concerned. It seems like the big issue with Green was the strikeouts. I'm not listening to that at this point. I wouldn't be concerned if that's the big knock on Elijah Green.
Yeah, I could definitely see Elijah Green being the guy, especially like you said, with what they've been able to do with some of these more raw, powerful, toolsy swings like Gunnar and Stowers. Like, if they think he's got the most powerful upside as a hit tool, power tool combination with his defense and arm in the outfield, then go at it. Let's do it. I want someone that they feel has the highest upside, as well as, being able to just make the most of the pick. That's all I want. So whether it's Brooks Lee or one of the high school guys, I think it's just proven that they're going to make the pick that they feel is the best for the system, and it's not going to be dictated by what's going to make people happy.
And keep in mind as you listen to this that we're still a little more than 2 months out from the draft, and a lot of things can change. But for now, these seem to be the 5 players or so that you should be keeping your eye on for that number one pick. And before we get into our staple of our last segment, where we highlight players outside of our top 30, and then we've got a good group together for that this week, do want to acknowledge our 100th episode. Bob and Nick, thank you for everything that you have done to help get us here, to bring us to this point. And thank you to Chris Stoner at BaltimoreSportsAndLife.com for putting us in this position, for supporting us with the site, to our BSL contributors, past and present, for their help with this show. So, and to all of our listeners who have made this happen.
Absolutely. You guys, this was Chris put us together, and it's just been like magic ever since. If this has been the favorite thing I've been a part of, I look forward to it every single week, and it's constantly on my mind all day, every day. My wife hates it, but I love it. And yeah, couldn't do it. Whether we had 1 listener or 1,000 or whatever, I'd be doing this and be happy to do it. So thank you. Yeah.
Remember, I don't know about you guys, but I just get super excited. We're like, we got 100 listens on this episode. How we have grown. Like I think I mentioned before on the show that, this whole story for me begins with like, I was drunk at a bar with my wife. And now like 6 years later, here I am. Like, I hated my job. I was looking for something fun to do. And started writing about Orioles minor league baseball, and now we're here with this podcast. Yeah, it led me to BaltimoreSportsAndLife.com, which is amazing. Like, I didn't know what to expect when we started in February of 2020. There are a lot of great Orioles podcasts out there, and many of them have been around for how long is Bird's Eye View? I know you guys are listening. I think it's been around for like 10 years.
A long time.
These shows have loyal followings. Connor is doing this every day during the regular season at Locked On Orioles. So like, why would anybody want to add? There's so many podcasts people could go to, right? Everybody has a podcast. But we have this loyal following. It's amazing to see how many people every single week listen to the show. We've crossed 100 patrons, which is amazing. We just interviewed Mike Elias. And for me, like, the listens are great. The people who tune in every week are fantastic. The patrons are unbelievable that you go that extra mile. But for me personally, like, what really is just like hits me in the gut and makes me so emotional here is like when we've had players reach out, like at the end of the last season, they're like, hey, thanks. Thank you for doing what you do. Players come on the show and like before we hop on, they're like, yeah, we really appreciate what you guys do. And just thank you for everything. We love your product. Members of the Orioles front office are like, hey, like, we love this content and we love what you guys are doing. And that means everything because I never expected us to reach this level that we were at and this product to be what it is. And yeah, you guys are, we're amazing, basically. The fans, we're nothing without the people who listen though. And you guys are obviously number one. So thank you.
Yeah, honestly, it's surreal. And it's a good feeling when you get that positive feedback. And I'm not a confident person in the real world, but this is one thing I'm confident that we put out a good product. So it's good to have. It's a good thing to have for sure.
Hopefully all of you all stick around when this rebuild is over.
Yeah. Mission accomplished. Okay, we don't have to listen to those guys anymore.
We found a really good niche, and we have filled that niche. But hopefully, when the Orioles are winning World Series titles, you still remember the prospects.
And we're going to turn our attention to some of those prospects now. Shouting out some guys that have impressed us with something they've done in the last week. Good game, good week overall, or maybe just some beneath the surface things that are kind of impressing us right now. And I'm going to start with Nick because he chose to shout out a guy that seems to be breaking out a little bit offensively and then an entire pitching staff.
Yeah. I mentioned before we came on that this was kind of a tougher week to, we'll admit it was a tougher week to find the guys. But Ryan Higgins was my hitter, like 6 games last week. He only hit 250, which for this segment isn't super impressive when you're talking about a weak sample size, but he did hit a double, triple, a home run, his first career home run, walked 6 times, struck out just 4 times. He's reached base in 8 of his last 9 games. He's got a lot of raw power in that bat, and it was good to see him finally connect on one. He had like less than 10 at-bats last year after being drafted out of Fresno State, and surgery ended the year. So he didn't have that GCL experience, FCL experience. I forget what we're calling it at this point. He didn't have that FCL experience. He didn't have that short season experience. He's just being thrust in like so many other guys on this Delmarva roster, except for Darrell Hernandez and Davis Tavares and a couple of other pitchers. Like, these guys are being thrown into full season ball like head first. And it's taken some time. It can be tough to watch some nights, but some guys are really turning it around, and Higgins is one of those. So kudos to him. Hopefully this is a turning point for him. And yeah, I just put down Aberdeen's starting rotation, like Houston Roth, Justin Armbruster, Gene Pinto, Carlos Tavera, and Connor Gillespie all started last week for the Ironbirds. They combined to throw 20 innings, just 1 earned run, 8 hits, 7 walks, 26 strikeouts. And we're going to talk about another guy in this segment as well, but shout out to Noah Denoyer. I'll hang on to the other guy, but Denoyer also, I think he allowed 1 run, a couple strikeouts, 1 walk in 3 innings of work. So this Aberdeen rotation, I said, was it me? Was it somebody else? I think it was another show. Was it us? I don't remember. Yeah. Someone said that this Aberdeen rotation was going to be overlooked, but you're going to have some breakout stars among this group. And so far, so good.
Yeah, I think I might have even copied that and said it on my Locked On Orioles Aberdeen preview. So, yeah, I'll go with mine next. JD Mundy, I went with for my hitter, who I think he was just coming back from an illness or a minor injury or something like that. But he had a really good week, especially with the walks that he took. I know he had 3 walks in 1 game. He also hit a bomb to center field the same game that Gunnar Henderson hit one out there. And he's got his numbers up to a respectable level. He's up to a 118 WRC plus, batting .255 with a 770 OPS, 9.5 walk rate, which is a little bit down from last year, but he seems to be moving in the right direction, and he's striking out less than he did at high A last year at 20.6%. So shout out to the slugging first baseman. Hopefully he can get some consistent playing time here and continue to do what he did last year at a higher level. And for the pitcher, I'm also in Double A Bowie. I'm going with Ryan Watson, who after Drew Rahm talked about him on our show last week, and then he was due to start with Adley Rutschman behind the plate. I was like, let me pay extra attention to Ryan Watson tonight. And the first 4 batters he faced went double, home run, double, and didn't look too good, but he settled down. He ended up going 5 and 2/3 innings, did give up another 2-run homer later in the game. But I also know that John Muley talked about he had a velocity bump, which I did not know about until I read that. And it makes a lot of sense. He's went from like 90, 91 to like 94, 95, and it's showing. He's got 4 pitches. He kind of reminds me of Brandon Young type, where he has 4 solid pitches he can throw in any count, and he is gritty out there. He's on the mound battling. He's got a 2.41 ERA, and his FIP is 3.12, xFIP 3.53, so it's not exactly like a fluke or anything. So I think Ryan Watson is a guy to watch, even though he did give up 6 runs in less than 6 innings his last time out. I think he's a dude.
Going a little unconventional with my pick for the hitter this week, because in 6 games he batted .200, but I think there are some positive trends going on here, and that's Isaac De Leon, Shorebird's infielder, who got off to a really slow start this year. That's still reflected in his stat line, but a couple of things that jump out at me. He had a couple of good games against Columbia, including a 2-for-3 2-walk performance on May 5th. And here's some numbers I'm going to pull up for him. 21% walk rate for Aberdeen this year. And we talked a little earlier about Gunnar Henderson facing hitters or pitchers that are older than him. In the case of De Leon, he has had 4 plate appearances all year against pitchers that are younger than him. He's 20 years old. He'll be 21 in November. So I think that there are some signs here of positive trends and some things that could be going the right direction for De Leon. Even if that batting average overall in the year at 155, obviously he still has a long way to go to bring that back up. And then my other pick is the South Atlantic League Pitcher of the Week, which still sounds weird. We're talking about a high A league, and that's Ignacio Feliz. Feliz, 5 innings, 1 hit, no runs, a walk, 5 strikeouts, piggybacking for Gene Pinto last week. He recorded the win, and Feliz, the strikeout stuff is back this year. After he really struggled at Aberdeen, we've seen him strike out 31 batters so far on the season against just 7 walks. The ERA right now over 6, but you have to factor in that was largely inflated by an outing he had on April 14th when he gave up 8 runs in the inning and 2/3 against Wilmington. Since then, he's pitched 12 innings, allowed 1 run, struck out 23, walked 3. After struggling when he got to Aberdeen last year, the Ignacio Feliz from Delmarva in early 2021 is back. The K-Strut is back. All is good.
47.7% strikeout rate for Aberdeen this year. That is absurd. How many? 15 and 2/3 innings. Yeah, the ERA is 6.32, but I just pulled it up to look. His FIP is 3.91 and his xFIP is 2.45. Not bad for a shortstop.
And how old is he?
Oh, good question. He's 22 and a half. So he'll be 22 all season.
Yeah, Tuesday nights are my favorite nights. Pinto and Feliz nights. they're fun to watch for sure. Back to back. Gotta love it.
Yeah, seeing those guys go in tandem is always must-see TV or must-see MILB TV.
Not must hear, though, that's for sure.
We will be back next week with episode 101. We are joined by Justin Ramsey. As we mentioned at the top of the show, that episode will likely come out on Tuesday, depending on the timing, if and when we see Adley Rutschman next week. So be sure to check us out on Twitter at BSL and the Verge to get updates on that. Also, check out BaltimoreSportsAndLife.com for Bob's latest articles, as well as the other great content we have on the site covering the Orioles and Ravens. And be sure to hop on the message board to join in discussion with fellow readers of the site, as well as contributors. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden, and this has been the 100th episode of On the